drawing and coloring techniques to get you started, just to really build dimension in your work, whether it's coloring in coloring books, or whether you're drawing and then coloring your own work, or just trying to create more dimensions in your drawing. So we're going to be doing some drawing exercises and a little bit talking about color theory, a little bit of everything just to get you started. So if you're interested in finding out what we're going to be up to, just stay tuned. Let's get started. Let's get started. All right, so supplies and materials. And I'm starting with the drawing. I did post the color materials and then also drawing separately. And really this month it's going to be more about the color, but I feel like it's kind of a topic that can be combined, because a lot of coloring, what coloring does is fill in the details of a drawing. So, so there are drawing aspects of coloring and then also coloring aspects to drawing. So I think that they go together well. And so here's the list if you didn't get it. You don't have to have all of these things, but I did want to just touch on the topic. There are a variety of different papers, and I'll go over a little bit of detail on that in a minute. But depending on what you're using, some papers are going to work better than others. Sketch paper is a little bit more inexpensive, a little bit rougher than a drawing paper. And again, a lot of these art papers will explain what they're good for. So when you're shopping, you can see, you know, what is this particular paper good for. And then of course there's pencils. Now with pencils, you can either get the wood pencils or you can get the mechanical pencils. And there are different thicknesses in the mechanical pencils. So they're not like the typical writing pencils. They're actually lead holders that have a thicker lead. So you can get that side. If you want to rub the lead sideways like you do on a wooden pencil, you can with these thicker lead holders. So just be aware of that, because with these really fine tips, obviously that you don't have to sharpen it, but you're only going to be able to do line drawing with those. You're not going to be able to do a lot of shading with that type of mechanical pencil. And there is a range of what the leads are, and I'm going to show you a chart on that in just a second. But what you'll notice a lot of times is either like an H or a B. So it might be 3B or 3H. Those are either hardness or blackness. So an HB, which is right in the middle of the hardness blackness scale, and that's equivalent to a number 2 pencil. And what's good about that is it has enough graphite content that you can get a dark enough color, but it's also strong enough where the lead stays sharp so you can get more detail. So that's right in the middle, and you're welcome to use that for any of the exercises that we're doing tonight if that's all you have. A lot of us have number 2 pencils in our household. F, which is one that I hadn't heard before, is fine point. And on the American scale, that's a 2.5, number 2.5. So I think that's a little bit more, it still holds a fine point, but it has a little bit more graphite. And then the numbers with the B next to them are darker. They have more graphite to clay, because basically the binder for pencils is clay and the graphite is the colorant. So if it's higher on the B scale, it's going to have more of the graphite, less of the clay, and it's higher on the H scale, it's going to be harder. You'll be able to get finer details, but you're not going to be able to blend that as much because it's not going to lay down as much graphite as, say, the B range. You do want a pencil sharpener. There are times when you want to have a really sharp pencil, and there are times when you want to have a more dull pencil, depending on what you're doing. And that's true whether it's graphite pencils or colored pencils. This sharpener that I have here is great for either color or graphite pencils. It has 3 sizes, which is really nice because not all colored pencils come in the same size. So it does accommodate for some of the larger size colored pencils. You'll also want a blending tool, and that is true again for either graphite or colored pencils. This is a set that that comes with both the tortillon and the stumps. The difference between that is the stump is more just compressed paper pulp product that is like a hard, that's shaped with the tips on each end, and the tortillons are rolled paper. So they do the same thing, but just are created differently. And I can't tell you if one's better than the other. I think they just, work for different things, but I don't know enough to be able to say, oh, this is the perfect tool for that. To me, I use them interchangeably, just whatever I have at hand. Sometimes you can get smaller, you know, these really fine points with these smaller ones. Sometimes I think the stumps have a little bit smaller, but anyway, and then this is the sandpaper, which you can use to either sharpen or remove the graphite from the stumps. You can also use that to sharpen your pencil lead. And in this kit, there's also an eraser. This is the moldable eraser, kneaded eraser, and I have that in my eraser list here too at the bottom. So these are a variety of erasers. You'll also see the pink pearl out there. I don't use that one for art because it's a little too abrasive, I think, and it can damage the paper, and it's just a risk of damaging the paper. So I use the white, either the white vinyl or white polymer for my durable erasing. Now the gum eraser is really soft, so if you're using it on delicate paper, this would be maybe the better one. It creates a lot of crumbles, but it absorbs graphite really well and it doesn't tear up your paper. The white one is a little bit more durable. You know, being gentle, it still works on somewhat on delicate paper, but just be careful not to go, you know, too far. If it's a real delicate paper, you might want to just stick with the gum, but it works really well with graphite. And then this electric eraser, which I mentioned earlier, and you can use the sandpaper to sharpen this as well. You just lay this sideways on the sandpaper and push it, and this rotates and it creates a point, so you can get some nice detail when you're lifting pigment. And that's what sometimes the eraser is to erase a mistake or remove smudges that you don't want, but it also can be used to lift, like to get highlights and things, like for details for hair or other highlights that maybe you lost in the smudging or the blending process. Now this is a pencil. This one can be erased on both sides, and one side I believe is a sand, and then one side is that pink pearl. So this is a pretty durable, but just for details, really fine details, again, like the electric eraser. And then this one is a sand eraser, and this would be used more for like removing ink. And what that's going to probably do is really take some layers of paper off. So just be really careful of using the sand. And then the kneaded eraser is great because you can use it to lift some pigment, but it's sticky, so it sort of lifts it by sticking to it rather than really rubbing. And you can also knead it to a very fine point if you want to, or shape it in any way that you want. So if you want a specific shape that you're trying to lift or remove, you can shape the eraser for that purpose. So that's a really nice, handy eraser to have. And I've also used, you know, like the tacky, like poster tack that you can get at the dollar store. That can do a little bit of the same thing. So if you have some on hand and you don't have this, you can try using that. It's that blue tack, or sometimes it comes in white, and it's for putting posters up on the wall. And that's like I said, a similar material and will work similarly to the kneaded eraser. Okay, the thing about other supplies to know is the paper. Now there are different papers and they have different tooth, and tooth is important to know about because it makes the texture of the paper. And depending on what you're using for coloring, it can affect how much white shows underneath. So if you have a really toothy paper, it's got these peaks and valleys, the graphite may only be touching these peaks and not getting into these valleys until you do some kind of smudging. Same with if you're using wax pencils or color pencils. What happens is you get a lot of white marks underneath because you have these valleys that it's not getting into. Now, sometimes with a blending tool or blending solvent, you can fill in those valleys and get a smoother look. And that's why you get more of a rough look to some of the markings and more of a smoother look depending on the type of paper that you're using. And you can see here a little guide for which ones to use for what types of paper. And these are some that you might find in the store, and you can see that they have sketch pads or pads for drawing sketch pads, color pencil specific. And if you go and look at them, you can kind of get an idea of what you might want for the paper that you're going to be doing. Now, this mixed media, it handles a variety of things, but I've been using that for my journaling, and I find that there are certain things that it's just, it's not as good for, like drawing, drawing some details, because it does have a little bit of texture. So with my fine liners, I don't feel like it is as good as some of my smooth choice, which is, I use this for my really, really smooth. I use that for my Copics and really markers and things like that. So, so try out some different things. Sometimes you can find a pad of paper that has multiple types of paper, so you can try out different ones, but just be aware that there are multiple options out there. As I mentioned earlier, the lead gradients are here, so you can see this is what they look like. This is going to be the least amount of the graphite to clay, and this is going to be the highest amount of graphite to clay. So you can see how much darker that's going to be. And then HB, which is right here in the middle, and that's the equivalent to the number 2. Here's the American scale, 1 through 4. And they have a 2.5, which is the middle of their scale. So that's F. I've never noticed an F pencil before, but just in case you see one. All right, so now let's do a few drawing exercises. All you need for this is any pencil, could be a number 2 pencil, and some scratch paper. You can use printer paper if you have a sketch pad or whatever. We're just going to try out some drawing exercises to get you warmed up, and just to like break the seal of trying out drawing. Drawing can be really intimidating for some people. Even artists that have been artists for a long time don't feel comfortable drawing. There are many painters that never draw for their paintings and are intimidated by it. But it's really not as bad as you think. I think there's more of a fear getting started than there really is a problem with being able to do it. And we're all at different levels. So that's the thing to remember, is whether you can draw or not, we all can draw, we just draw at different levels. And I'm going to show you an example of that right now. So if you're ready, if you have your paper and your pencil, start with just writing this sentence 5 different ways, okay? The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. We're just going to take a few seconds here to write that down, just using different fonts. You can do handwriting, whatever you want to do, capitals, just try it out 5 different ways. Now, you don't have to try to be neat here. This is just to warm up your drawing hands and your mind. Get in the frame of mind that you can draw. Because guess what, folks? Letters are just drawings of it. There's just shapes, and that's what drawing is. It's just creating shapes. 3, 4, 5. Okay, I have 5. Don't worry if you didn't get finished, but I just want to keep moving along. The point that I'm trying to make here, this is a sentence that includes all the letters of the alphabet. And when we learned the ABCs and our numbers, we learned how to draw those shapes. Each of these is just a shape, and all drawing is a series of lines and curves and dots. That's all it is. So we already know how to draw. We know how to draw letters and numbers. All we're doing is now expanding. So in this exercise, and we'll just do a short version of it, but this is a good warm-up exercise, or just a daily exercise if you're trying to just practice your drawing, is to observe yourself doing lines, doing these drills basically of dots, lines, and curves, and then shapes, because basically putting it all together, you can create any shape. And that's all it is. Basically, a line is just 2 dots that you connect. And then a curve is just basically going from one point to another point, but just turning your arm a little bit so that it curves. And just depending on how much you curve it, it can change the shape. So go ahead and just spend a few, we'll just do it for like maybe a minute. You can practice as many of these different shapes as you want. And just think about when you're making, whether it's dots or lines or curved lines, think about how you're doing it. Does it feel better to pull it towards you? Does it feel better to go cross horizontal on your page? What is the more natural feeling when you draw that particular shape? So start out with just doing some dots. That's pointillism. You'll see that a lot in doing some shading or just creating some texture on a drawing. And it's a great one to have. You can just basically tap your pencil on the page. The more you hold it down, if you tap and rotate, you get a little bit of a darker dot. And now if you're using a marker, then of course all you have to do is touch and it's going to put some of that ink down. But this is a great filler. You can fill a lot of your drawings with dots. The next one is lines, and try to make it straight. Now be aware that if you hold your arm on the page and you push your pencil, it naturally makes an arc from pivoting from your elbow. If you were to start at one end of the page and then just rotate your arm, you're going to actually create an arc. It's not going to be a straight line. So you have to think about that, and you have to push your whole arm or pull your whole arm instead of just planting part of your wrist or part of your elbow, because you're, like I said, you're going to get an arc. So try just drawing straight lines that are parallel to one another, and try them from different orientations. Try pulling them towards you, try pushing them away from you, try going sideways. See what feels comfortable to you. What I'm hoping you'll find by doing this exercise is how to shift the paper around when you're drawing that's going to give you the most consistent drawing ability. Because for me, if I sometimes pushing or pulling the line is easier for me than going horizontal across the page. So all I do is rotate my paper to make sure that I am finding the most comfortable way to draw my lines. Now, curvy lines could be like a C shape or an S curve, or you could do just like waves. There's lots of things you can do with the curvy lines. When you do the shapes, try different sizes of the shape: small, large, medium, large, and again, different orientations for how you draw them. Now, circle is of course the same no matter which angle you are, so that's a little different, but you could try drawing them counterclockwise and then clockwise, for example. See if one rotation feels a little bit easier for you than others. Okay, go ahead and just pause this particular exercise. We can move on to the next one, but just be aware, like if you're warming up or trying to do daily exercises to keep your drawing skills or to build your drawing skills, try just picking a shape or picking one of these drills and just doing a whole page of it. And then you can even go further if you want, especially with the shapes. You can start working on trying to make them more three-dimensional on the page. So that's just one way you can practice in your journal or warm up for drawing. All right, now we're going to do another exercise where we're going to be drawing our hands, or you can pick something else. You can pick anything you want, but I figure we probably all have an extra hand. If you don't, then just pick something that's nearby. But without looking at your hand, you're going to draw an outline of it. So you're going to be focusing, you're just going to be basically drawing your memory of what a hand looks like. It's just a quick sketch. We're not doing any kind of details, just basically an outline sketch. So go ahead and do that now. All right, now you're going to be looking at your hand, and you're going to try to basically trace your hand with your eyes. Don't look at the paper, just look at your hand and try to, by tracing the outline of your hand, try tracing the outline shape on your page. So make sure where you put your pencil, it gives you enough space to do the tracing of your hand. And you can choose if you want to try to do it the same size as your hand, or if you want to try to make it a smaller scale. If it's a little bit trickier to make it a smaller scale, because you're going to be trying to follow along with how your eyes are tracing the object. So whether it's your hand or something else. So just put your hand in whatever position that you want it to be in, and then focus completely on that. And then start at a point, pick a point on your hand where you want to start, and then just follow the contour of your hand, just focusing on the shape of the outside contour. Now, if you had more time, you could actually fill in some of the details too. Try to not lift your pencil from the paper, just follow the tracing of your fingers. Okay. And then once you're done, you can look. And hopefully you get a good chuckle. I do. We're not going to judge or anything like that. We're just practicing these exercises, and then later we'll observe our, we'll think about our observations of it, but just enjoy the process. This is all about the process, not the end result. Okay, now you're going to do the same sketch, but this time you get to look at your hand as much as you want, and you can, we'll try to not take too much time, but you get to look back and forth from your paper to your hand, and then sketch your hand once again. Okay, now probably you did a little better being able to look at your hand than you did it blind, and possibly not. You never know. Sometimes maybe looking could make it feel more, more intimidating. Okay, next, we're just look at your hand now and look for the details of your hand. What is the texture of your skin? Where are there wrinkles, or can you see veins? What do your nails look like? Do you need a manicure like me? I really need a manicure. So you're just going to be observing the details of your hand and recognize that what we have in our mind as a memory of our hand really doesn't capture all of these little details when we really pay attention and look at it. Little scars, little crevices, wrinkles, blemishes, freckles. All of those things are lost when we're just trying to memorize the details. But when you learn to have a more artistic eye, when you start to notice these details, that's going to help you in developing your drawing skills. You, as the artist, get to decide how much of this story you want to tell. You don't have to tell the whole story. I don't have to put in my scar. I don't have to put in my veins. Maybe I want to just put in the main things, like some of the wrinkles, the folds in my skin that are around the knuckles, just enough of the story to tell them that this is a hand. Maybe I want add my jewelry, maybe I don't. So really, as the artist, you get to decide where you limit the story, and that's the artistic license, and that's what changes it from being reality to art, is basically how you decide to interpret it. So now just take a few seconds more and just add a few more details to your drawing that you noticed when you observed your hand. A lot of times our minds will fill in details of what we expect, and they're not always accurate. So sometimes our mind can actually impact how we draw in negative ways, because we fill in details that just aren't there, or maybe we think that something is a certain way and it's not, because when we look at it, we fill in some details that maybe aren't there. So it's important just to recognize that, and then take time observing and saying, what is really there? Is that really there, or is that just in my mind's eye? Am I adding that detail? A lot of times when we're drawing from memory, we're drawing it at a simple angle of what we normally see. We're not going to draw it at, like if we're drawing a bicycle, for example, you're going to see both tires. You're going to probably see it from the side view, because that's the easiest recognition that we have of a bicycle. When we were young and we were learning what things were and how to spell them and what they look like, they gave us a simple picture of it. You're probably not going to try to do a front view of a bicycle where maybe all the tires, maybe partial the tire showing. And I mean, that's a very complex angle to be looking at it. So we try to simplify it in our mind just to recognize it. And when we can really take time to observe it, we're going to see details and contours that we just, don't remember or don't see when we're not really zooming in and focusing. Okay, now take a moment to just observe your 3 sketches and think about what you don't like about each of them and what you do like about each of them. And what did you notice during these exercises? And you could just write on your page, if you want to, any observations that you have. All right, now we're going to talk a little bit about how to take it to the next level from the basic line drawing, which is just an outline, the basic contours of a drawing, to give it some dimension. And some of the ways that we can do that is by considering the positive and negative space. So when you look at a composition, for example, this one here, there is the positive space, which is the shapes of the subject itself. The subject in this case are these arms and the hands, creating this heart shape here. But the heart shape itself and this space here and this space around here, that's all the negative space. And sometimes we have to use the negative space. We're going to be putting in a negative space in order to highlight the shape of the positive space or the subject. For example, if you're trying to draw, let's say, a white dog or white animal or white flower, anything that's going to be lighter than the background, you're going to be focusing probably on creating these negative shapes around the white space rather than creating, filling in the shapes themselves. Now, in this case, I would fill in this shape, of course, of the arms, but then this shape is a medium hue, whereas the hands are very light. So I'm going to probably want to fill in around those hands to get that shape. So just being aware of the positive and negative space, not only the positive space, and that's going to help you to just make it a little bit more realistic and be able to create some dimension. Another way to create dimension is shading. Now with shading, you have to think about contrast. Contrast is the state of being strikingly different relative to an element in close association. So this can be color, this could be tone or value of color, but it can also just be, maybe has a very different texture. Maybe one part of it is very smooth and another part is very textured. So you get some contrast and that can create interest in your composition. So in this case, I have a very contrasting where the lights and the darks are for this particular image. Now it can also be contrast related to from lightness to darkness. So anything that's black and white, that's going to be the extreme ends of that contrast, contrast spectrum. Then you also have to consider value. Value is the relative lightness or darkness of a color. And this is the grayscale version of it, but all colors have a value. So this is actually a value finder. You can purchase this online. And what you do is you hold it up. These are openings in this little card, and you hold it up to the color to get an idea of what level of value it is. And to add different values in your work can create more interest, more contrast, and just to create a little bit more energy to your piece. So that's one way to get dimension, is just by using different values and not keeping everything similar. When you squint, you'll notice, if you look at this and you squint, you'll notice these values that are close together, they sort of disappear. You can't see the difference between one value to the next value. And that's what happens if you're trying to draw a picture or draw an image. If everything is the same value or similar values, when you squint, that whole picture might just disappear. You're not going to see the shapes that you want because they're going to disappear when and they're going to get lost in that common value. So by creating higher contrast values, you're going to have more definition to your shapes and more defining one element of your picture to another element, if that makes sense. Also, you can show the luminosity. The brighter it is, the lighter it is, the more light reflecting it looks like. So it gives it kind of a lighter look to it versus something that's darker and more shadowy. And then also you can create gradients in your work where you try to go from light to dark. And like I did here, there's some elements of, you know, this is the darker color, and then we lighten up as we move towards this lighter area. So creating gradients, that's another way of just kind of blending the color a little bit, getting more natural looking color. Because in real life, it's not black or white. It is a gradient and shades. And so the more you can build that into your work, the more realistic. And that's what we're moving towards. We're not trying to say that, oh, your work has to be realism, but it's just going from how much do you want it to be abstract to how much do you want it to be realistic. And the more you can develop some of these skills, the more likely you're going to get a little bit more realism to your work. Now, in this case, this right here, I'm showing light and shadow. And the highlight, of course, is where the light is coming from. So in this case, the light is a little bit forward of this sphere and coming from this direction. So the lightest elements are here, and then the darkest elements are opposing that. Now you'll see that there's a highlight here, and that's because light can reflect up from the surface. So if something is sitting on a shiny surface, you're going to get more reflected light than if it's not. So you might notice that when you start observing objects, you might see this lightness that you think, oh, that shouldn't be there because that's the dark side of the moon, but it's just this reflected light. And then there's the shadow that's cast from the object itself. So the light's coming this way, and then there's a shadow here because it's not receiving any light over here. And then there's also a crest shadow. So that's when the object is more curved or rounded. As the object moves away from you, from the viewer, and from the light source, it starts to get more shadowier, darker. So you'll notice that you know, the dark colors looks more receding, and then the lighter it is, it looks more like it's coming towards you, and that basically tells you that this is a sphere, not just a circle, and that takes you from a two-dimensional object to more three-dimensional object. So those are ways that you can build on whatever project you're working on. You can do this in color too, but I wanted to show you this in just black and white and just graphite, because this is the same kind of the same things you're going to be using when you do coloring. You're just going to be doing it in color, but it's easier to see it when you're not also being distracted by the colors. If I were to show you this in various colors, it would be harder to see this gradient as easily. So it's just easier to talk about it in black and white, but this is the same thing we're going to be using in color. All right, let's talk a little bit about color. The first thing that's important to know is to understand is color theory. And these color wheels are a great way to, a great little cheat sheet, if you will, to help you pick the right colors that work. Now, you can also look in your home for, let's say, pillows or your curtains or other decorative things, and you can find color schemes in those that you like, and you could use those color schemes. Also look at your wardrobe, because the fashion designers, they're going to make things that are using colors that work well together. But if you're not sure, and of course you have creative license to use any color you want, but just realize that some colors together are going to work a little bit better than other colors, and they're going to do different things as far as mood goes with your piece. So depending on what you're trying to achieve. Now, here are some examples of some color palettes. For example, complementary, those are the colors that are opposing on the color wheel. So anything that's across from each other on the color wheel are complementary colors, and those used together are very contrasting, and it gets your attention. So it really highlights your attention. And that's why, for example, like holiday colors are green and red, because those are opposing colors and they really like make each other pop. Now, the other side, the flip side of that is if you're using a medium that is translucent and you play them across each other or mix them together, what they do is they cancel each other out and it becomes a more subdued color. So if you were to mix the green and red, you get more of a gray version of that. Now, what you can do is if you're trying to create a shadow side of something, you could add a little gray. Or if you're trying to subdue a color, let's say you want a more subdued green, you could just add a tiny bit of red to it and it grays it out and subdues it and tones it down a little bit. So that's why it's important to understand how colors work, because especially if you're using any kind of translucent mediums, and what I mean by that is they're transparent. So if you lay the red on top of the green, you're going to see some of that green come through, like watercolors, colored pencils for sure. Now, if you're using acrylic paints, then it's more, then you can lay it on, as long as the paint's dry, you can lay red over green. And if you get a nice thick opaque layer, it's not going to matter. Those are really going to pop against each other. So just be aware of, be cautious about mixing those together with transparent mediums because you don't want to gray out your color. Now the split complementary, that's using basically the two colors that are alongside this complementary color with this color that's across from it. So that creates a triangle. There's also the triad. So basically if I were to pick this color, then I could pick this color, and that's how to read this particular chart. There's the tetrad, and there's two types of tetrads. There's the rectangle one and then the square one. So you're covering a lot of different options there, and there probably are more out there, and you can use the whole rainbow if you want. One way to be safe though, if you are trying to work with colors and you're fairly new, is using analogous colors or colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. Anything that basically is next to each other is going to work together. So if you're working with three colors, you can pick any three colors that are next to each other and they're going to work together. Now, I probably, well, no, I would even choose that. Yeah, I would choose anything that's three next to each other, because these colors are made using each other. So how that works is there are three primary colors, basically yellow, blue, and red. Those are the primary colors, and every other color out there is a mix of these primary colors. Now, when you look at a box of crayons or colored pencils, you're going to notice, probably 20 different reds and 20 different yellows. So, so if we're being really true, we have to say, okay, you want to use a primary red, not a blended red, and that can be different depending on which red you're using. And that's why it's so important for you to create your own color wheel. And I'll show you, I do have a template of that in the kit for tonight, in the packet for tonight, and I'll show you that in just a minute. But if you're using a primary or neutral red, a primary neutral yellow, and a primary neutral blue, and you mix it together with other colors, like for example, blue and violet, you're going to get blue violet. If you mix red with violet, you're going to get red violet. So these are the primary colors, and the colors that you mix by mixing these together, like if I mix blue and red together, I'm going to create a secondary color, which is violet. If I then mix that color again with a primary, I'm going to get a tertiary color. So it's primary, secondary, tertiary, and that just means that you're sort of moving down the scale up from those primary colors. And this gives you a lot of information about color theory, hues, tones. If you mix gray to something, you make a different tone of it. If you add black to it, you get shades. So this tells you a lot more about the color theory. I'm not going to go into that tonight, but this also shows that grayscale value. I just like that thing with the holes in it helps you, figure out what the value is. Now, if I'm looking at this value scale here and I pick something on this value scale, like let's say pick this value, and then I look around these colors, which of these colors fall into that value scale? I would say probably the yellow. If I move down and I choose this value, then I probably would align that maybe more with this orange. But as you can see, when you're looking at the colors, it's a little trickier to tell the value. That's why they have these scales to help you this rotates around and you can actually line it up with the color to see, which value of this is. That way you can mix up your values and get a range of values in your work. Okay, this is the template that I have that's in the packet for tonight. So this is a color wheel that you can create yourself. Now, next week, we're going to be working on the color wheels. For those of you who were in my mandala series last month, we created an emotion wheel mandala that we're going to do. We're basically going to do a color palette wheel on. So that'll be next week. But you can print this out and well, the paper, depending on what medium you're using. This is an example of one with watercolors, but you're going to basically mix these colors together. So with a colored pencil, I'm going to basically put my red here, and I'm going to write in here on this line what red it is, which, you know, I'll write up here what brand or whatever it is. But then I'm going to write the color that I'm using. And I'm just going to put a light, just a light shade, a medium shade, meaning I just add a little bit more pigment, and then a darker shade, or you can do it, you know, reverse if you want. But so lightest, medium to darkest in the shade, meaning you just put more pigment down as you move out in the wheel. And then when you get to the next side, you're going to mix whatever orange you use. Now, if you're going to be mixing it, you can use your yellow plus your red to create your orange, your yellow orange, or your orange to mix to make that. So you're just going to use all the colors that will get you to the red orange. I hope that makes sense. So in order to get orange, for example, you would have to mix the yellow and the red to get the orange. And then in order to get red orange, you'd have to mix the yellow and red, and then just add a little bit more red to get red orange. You're just going to move it closer and closer to that red color by just mixing it. Instead of 50-50 yellow and red, you're going to mix it more 25-75 yellow red, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's making your own color wheel, which again, we'll be working on actually making one next week. Now, here's the supply list for coloring. Basically, you need something to color. Now, if you're a drawer, you can color your own drawings, which we'll be doing some of that this month. Or you can get a coloring book, or you can print your own color pages. There are a million different websites out there that you can say free adult coloring pages, pick your subject, and you can print them right onto either printer paper or a nicer, this is a cardstock that I like to use. Depending on what medium you're using to color it with, choose the paper that's appropriate. And then you can use pretty much any of these things to color it with, as long as you have, you know, decent paper. Now, if you're working with anything that's a wet medium, like acrylics or watercolor, then you're going to want to probably work with a paper or canvas that's going to be able to handle that wetness. The cardstock can handle a little bit of it, but it's just not going to be able to handle a lot of wetness. So you just have to be careful. And then there's blending agents. There's either the mechanical blending, which you can use the pencils themselves, or like I talked about before, there's the tortillon or stumps you can use for either colored pencils, or you can use that for graphite. You can also use a Q-tip, but Q-tips just don't give you as much detail. So if you're doing a bigger area, you can use that. You can even use folded up paper towel if you're basically blending a larger area. It's just that you're not going to get those details that you're going to get with that tortillon and stump. So it just depends on what you're working on. And then there's the solvents you can use, depending on what it is. If it's a water soluble, of course, water. And then alcohol works with wax colored pencils. And I think I tried it with even my oil base, and I think it might have worked. But here are some that are common. I try to limit my chemical solvents, but if you're interested in doing that, just you know, these are some of the options that are out there. And I do have a little chart. So this is for colored pencils and what you can use to as a solvent, and some of the pros and cons for these. And this is in my previous the previous video too, but I left the guide in this presentation as well. So in case if you purchase this one, you'll still get these guides. And also a markers guide. So there's water-based markers and alcohol-based markers. And you do want to use different paper because alcohol can bleed through the back of the paper. And depending on what it is, the thinner the paper, the more it's going to bleed. Just make sure you protect whatever's behind it if you're going to do that. But some markers work better on certain papers than other markers. And so that's the important thing to remember. The paper that I showed up here, this works with a lot of what I use. Just maybe I wouldn't use this probably for acrylics or watercolor, but I use it for all of my other things and it works okay. Probably not great for pastels. Pastels, you probably do want a little more texture. This is a really smooth paper, but it does work for my markers. It works for my gel pens, my pencils. I don't typically use crayons, but I did do some examples last time just to show you guys that you can use crayons. But this works pretty well for a lot of things. I make greeting cards, so this is the paper I use, so I can do a lot of different things on it. Okay, and then it's a good idea to create swatches, a swatch sheet of whatever you have, whatever pigmented things you have, whether it's watercolor, acrylics. I do it for everything, pencils, markers, and I'll put the numbers down. And this is an example of just getting the colors swatch. And then I went and did blending. Because what I do is I store my pencils in combinations of 3 because I like to work with triads. So I went through and figured out all of my colors and I put them together in order in my organizer by how I want to use them. So I want to use these three colors together. For example, I have a light, medium, and dark of this shade of kind of a maroon color. So here's an example of it blended together where I've used all 3 of them. So I try it out, see if I like those together. I mean, maybe I will, maybe I won't, but now I know what they look like. And then I also did that with my alcohol markers. Again, I did it without all of my pigmented stuff. These are Fluency markers, and I'm going to show you examples of some projects that I worked with all of these different pigmented mediums. Some work better than others, and some of it's the paper. Maybe this particular alcohol marker doesn't work great on this paper, although my Copics work really well. I think it's just that these are dollar store alcohol markers that I got at Daiso, and these are very expensive alcohol markers, and so they just blend better, and maybe they have better better color options as well. I had limited colors in this group of markers, and I had a lot more choices here. And this is using the Bic markers. Again, the Sharpie alcohol markers, you can do some blending, but they're just not as good at blending as you're going to see with Copics. And this is why you pay $8 a marker, because they just are, I mean, the quality is there. But if all you have is these, you can play around with those and you might be able to get some blending. And again, it might depend on the paper that you're using. In my workshop packet, for tonight, I also have these templates that you can use. This is the one that I downloaded for the supplies to do some practicing on, but these are for practicing. So you can use this for color swatches, and especially for blending. You can use these for doing shadows or shading, and this you can work all sorts of techniques: shading, texture, embellishing, whatever you want to do. Now here's some examples of this is not the high-end color pages. This is pretty thin paper. So these different mediums may work better on different quality paper, but this is a pretty low quality paper. And but I did it all on it's all the same book. So I just tried out all of my different pigmented mediums that I had that I typically would color with, and I just did an example for each of them. This is the really cheapest crayons you could probably find out there. So probably if I was using Crayola, I might get a better result. This was very difficult because very quickly the wax built up, because this just has a high wax to pigment content. It was hard to get my layers on there. So I just, at some point it was like just impossible to get any more pigment down. This was using the these Pentel Arts oil pastels. And I hadn't worked a lot with these, so this was kind of a first experience, but and some of it, went better than other areas. It's a little splotchy. There's a lot of crumbs and things that show up on the page, but it was still fun to try out. And like I said, I'm still learning a lot of these. This was using these water-soluble oil pastels. Again, I hadn't really used these, so it was fun to try those out. And these feel like a wax crayon type pastel, but you can add water. So that's what I did. I was able to blend it with water. So it's a really bizarre thing because it feels waxy, but it's water soluble. And then the Smart Color chalk pastels, again, I haven't really used those too much, but I got to try out those here. I did try it with water, and the paper was just started to peel up. It was just the paper couldn't handle much moisture, so that didn't work there. But as you can see, just using some of these techniques of getting dimension, doing some shading, you can get a little bit more realism. None of these are trying to be real, but it's just moving towards a little bit more dimensional, a little bit more contrast, and just make it a little more interesting than just coloring one color across the page. You know, you're just giving it a little bit more more contour and dimension. This is using Derwent Intense pencils. And I did put links down here when I could, when it was available on Amazon. So if you get the notes, you can always click on these live links. But this is a water-soluble ink-based pencil. And the one thing about this is that it's supposedly once you wet it, once you've activated this, it becomes permanent, unlike a watercolor pencil, which stays maybe activatable. Although I think once you've worked with it enough, there's a point where it just doesn't activate much more either. But that's what this touts. It says, okay, it's permanent once you've activated it. Well, if you don't activate all the color and then you re-wet it, it's going to activate more. So just be aware. I had a limited palette here. I didn't really have any flesh tones, so I had to kind of work with what I had. So you can see my flesh color was kind of weird, but I did my best with my limited colors. And it was a fun challenge. Anyway, it's very vibrant. It's very vibrant color, intense. The thing is, it doesn't move as much as a watercolor. So I feel like it kind of stops on the page. Now, again, this could be because of the type of paper that I'm using. Maybe on different paper, it would move a little bit better. But I find that the watercolor pencils gave me a little more flexibility. This seemed to like move a little bit and then it stopped and then it was locked. It was done, you know. So this is the Faber-Castell Polychromos, which is an oil-based pencil. And this pencil is great for, you can really layer it more than a lot of the wax-based pencils. And I have a limited palette in this as well, but I really like the feel of using this particular pencil. It is higher price point, but you can do a lot with it. And again, I'm not an expert at coloring. So someone who's got a lot more experience would be, you know, be able to even take this up another level. And again, that depends on the paper too, because this is pretty low quality paper. So this is using Prismacolor Premier wax-based pencil, and I do actually have all the colors. That's the wonderful thing about Prismacolor Premier is they do have a wide range of colors, and the price point is a little less. Now this is a softer lead, so it does tend to break a little bit more, and it gets dull a little quicker compared to the Polychromos, which has a firmer lead. It stays sharper longer, and that's one of the good things about it. But it's they're a very vibrant color. They're fun to play with, and they have a wide range of colors. So I was able to play around with some more skin tones. Skin tones are tricky anyway, and when you have limited colors, it's even trickier.
Shauna, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Do you think we can go back to those the last color pencil? Yeah, that actually, what was the one before that you showed?
The Faber-Castell Polychromos?
Oh yeah, these ones. Thank you. I just wanted to take a picture.
Sure.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
No problem. No problem. These are probably my favorite to work with, but I don't have I haven't invested in the full color range, and so it does have some limiting factors there as compared to what I could do, because I do have more of these ones. But if I was going to just pick one, I probably would pick this one. It just, like I said, it keeps the lead doesn't break, it doesn't break down quickly, it's a little firmer, but you pay for what you get for. And usually what happens when these price points, whether it's wax, oh, was there a question?
I'm just telling you, I had the Prismacolors pencils, and over time they tend to get really, really soft.
Yeah.
Especially if they've been through different heats, different temperatures and everything else. Mine sort of just, I had them for quite a while, and I started sharpening the pencils, and they just sort of didn't hold up at all.
That is the downside to the prism
I'm just
color.
letting that, I'm just being informative.
Yeah, yeah, thank you, thank you. And what can happen too is sometimes if the way the pencil's manufactured, the lead isn't sealed to the wood, what'll happen is the whole lead inside can kind of break and come out, you know. So that, you know, those are some of the things. If you're looking at the different quality and why you pay more for one thing versus another thing, one of the things that you're paying for is more pigment versus wax or whatever the binder is. In this case, it's wax. So the higher the price point, you're going to get, typically, may not always be the case, but typically you're going to get more of the pigment versus the binder, and you also might get a better quality of pigment in that particular pencil or whatever it is, whether it's paint or pencils or anything. You're going to get possibly a higher quality color, whether it's whatever manual that they use, and then also just more color to the binder. And you do have to be careful, and this is true with any colored pencils. You do want to try to keep them in a, you know, in an environment that's not too hot or too cold, because then cold makes it brittle. So you do want to take care of them, you know, try not to drop them, because you can, if you drop a set or something and it breaks inside, again, the whole lead might just pop out. So you do have to kind of handle these with care, especially if you're going to invest in it. If you're getting the, you know, the cheaper Crayola wax colors, you know, it's like, okay, it's easy to replace. But if you do, you know, invest, take care of it, try to keep it out of sunlight, don't leave it in your car. Even in shipping, sometimes if they have to be left outside, you might not want to ship it during the hot summer. So just be aware that that all of them can be sensitive to temperature changes. And these just tend to be soft. Now they are soft and they feel really, you know, soft going on, which is nice. They're real creamy, but they can lose their sharpness very quickly and break. So that's just the downsides of that. Okay, now this is the Faber-Castell Albrecht Dur, which is the Faber-Castell watercolor. And those are, like I said, the watercolors tend to have a little bit more movement compared to the ink tints. And I find that, you know, they say, oh, you can use it like a colored pencil, like a regular colored pencil or a watercolor pencil, but I don't find that the watercolor pencils look as good if you don't wet them. Like, I feel like you need to wet them to really, you know, make the most out of them. So I find that, you know, they don't blend as well. I've tried using them. I don't think that's the case, but you might have a different experience. But I find that if you're going to be doing blending, use either the wax or oil. And if you want to do water-based, then use the watercolor or ink tints. This one was done with markers, and this isn't the exact packaging. Mine was fiber color, but this was the closest thing I could find. It was a really, fairly inexpensive 100 pack of colors that I've had for literally over 10 years, and it's still working. And what I do is I use my water brush with it to do some of the blending. So I will put some of the color on a palette and then put it on. That way, if I want softer colors, because it doesn't blend as well as, say, an oil. I'm sorry, not oil, as an alcohol marker does. And again, I'm working with this particular paper, which, you know, it doesn't move really, really great, but still, you know, I got some okay results with that. I mean, for inexpensive. Now, as I mentioned before, I have these Fluency alcohol markers. Those are from Dyso, which is local. There's a local chain of them here in San Diego. I don't know where else they have them, but these are $1.50. You get 2 alcohol markers. And this is an example of what I did with that. And the cheeks didn't work out. I didn't have really, you know, much skin tone color. I didn't really have anything other than this really light peach and then this really dark pink. So that didn't work out, but otherwise I think it turned out okay. You know, I had to work a little bit. It didn't blend like my Copic markers, but it did okay. And as long as you understand, you know, how it works, that's the important thing. And that's what I'm trying to drive home is you can work with anything as long as you understand the limitations and, you know, the pros and cons of it and how it works with the paper that you're working with. And it's going to be different on each paper. So just, you know, give things a try. This is using the Copic markers. Again, this paper is not great, but I was able to get some pretty good blending regardless of that. And part of that has to do with having, you know, enough color ranges that I can do that. And then this was done with just Jelly Roll pens. And of course I don't have skin tones and I didn't fill in. So I just kind of, you know, created this sort of scale effect using that pointillism, like I mentioned before, just placing dots along the edges there. And it's a fun effect that you can add to give texture to lots of things. I use some, you know, hatching and like cross hatching just to get texture, because again, these are not markers. They don't really blend very easily. It's hard to do bigger areas with them, but they're great for details. But I wanted to really use only one thing per page. Now, what I would recommend is mix them all up. If you've got all of these different mediums, when you're creating something, you know, mix them all in there. Many of them work together perfectly well. So maybe you want an area that you want it to be more blended and watery, and you can use the watercolor pencils, and then other areas you want the wax pencils. You can add wax pencils to marker drawings or even watercolors to get details. So don't be afraid to mix up your medium when you're doing coloring. All right, now let's practice if we have time, hopefully. Okay, there are my hands. Wait, this one is from my memory. And then this is from just looking at my hand and not at the page. And then that one's looking at both. So probably similar to some of yours in that obviously from our memory, it's just a really simple, you know, drawing. And then not being able to look at it, it's really hard to figure out your spatial orientation. But what it does is it helps you to recognize that the contours of our hand, I mean, it goes in and out a little bit here and there, and we don't really notice that. If we just, you know, do it from memory, it's like, oh, it's just a straight finger. But really there's little contours that we may not have noticed when we really pay attention. So it's an interesting exercise, I think. Okay, let's see. And I wanted to show you also, these are some examples of lead holders as compared to the mechanical pencils that tend to be very, let me show you example. So, I mean, these are lead holders too, but this is just a really fine tip. So that's great for doing details and lines and for like drawing our guides for mandalas. But if we want to do shading, that's going to be really hard to shade with, right? So these ones, the lead is a lot thicker. And you can get these leads in all different sizes. So I mark my lead holder with the lead gradient that it is. But I'm able to then get a little bit more, you know, shading. I can go to the side a little bit more and get more shading. Whereas I wouldn't be able to do that. Here, let's show my attempt. I'm not going to, you know, I can do a little bit of shading, but it's just not going to be, there's going to be a lot more pencil strokes in there. I don't know if you guys can see that. So if I try to shade with this fine, I'm going to get a lot more of these line strokes. Whereas if I can go from the side, I can get a softer shading look. Look at how seamless that looks. And part of that is because this is a 6B and this is probably like a number 2, but
I don't know what's the name of the one that holds the lead. That one, yeah.
This is Statler brand.
Oh, okay.
And I have a bunch of different ones. This one is Prismacolor. And I tried to get different ones so they looked different so that I didn't, you know, so I could kind of tell them apart. This is a 4B. And then the leads come, they come in like, you know, these little holders, or you can get a set of the leads. So the nice thing about those is, you know, you can keep a fairly sharp point on them, you know, just by kind of running, like I could sharpen it just by rotating this, or I could use that the sandpaper, but also there is actually sharpeners for this lead. And let's see if I have mine handy. There's a little, that's a mechanical pencil sharpener, but it's for this type of lead. And see, this has a little hole in it, and you just put it in there and it'll sharpen it. So see, it sharpens the lead. And that's, I think that's step there too. And this is like a little sharpener and then a little.
I've seen where people try to shave their pencils like with a razor to get the point out like that.
Yeah.
But that seems, that one, what you're doing now seems easier than shaving the pencil.
Yeah. I mean, that's, yeah. Well, especially for these kinds. I mean, I've never done it with the blade, but I think Kyle was mentioning doing that with like the wood pencils, I think. And again, you can use, I made my own little sandpaper deal. So I could also use that. I think I'm going to use that on this one. But you can just, you know, you just basically rotate this. And also sometimes you can use the shavings, you know, you can use those in your art too. If you want to do, shadows, you can use some of that pigment and lay it down. So there might be a time when you actually want to just get the pigment to be able to do shadows. You can do that using the sandpaper as well. Okay, now my finger's all dirty. And you can use your finger as a blending tool too. It has a little bit of, you know, there's a little bit of oil to it though. So you have to be careful because it might put some oils on the paper that you don't want. So this is actually just kind of this paper I'm using is just a cheaper sketch paper that I pulled out of a sketchbook. Okay, now let's just play around a little bit with some techniques with this. If you printed off this Lotus sheet, you can use that. If you didn't, just, you can draw something, or you can, you know, draw circles and make little globes or whatever. You can draw anything, but that's what this is for. It's just to practice some different techniques on the same sheet. I also want to bring up, if you don't want to worry about coloring or anything like that, like color theory, this was something I did by just randomly selecting whatever pencil I grabbed, and then I just picked a spot and then randomly picked a pencil and then put that color in, and then just use that color for a while, and it's still fine. So you don't have to you don't have to make it complicated. Work at the level you're at. If you're not ready for color theory, then don't worry about it. If you are, and you want a little help, you get one of these because they're great. They really do help. See, now I can show you that it rotates. So this basically shows you the tint, tone, and shade. So a tint is if you added white, this color is a tint. If you added gray to this color is a tone, and then if you added black, it's a shade. So this shows the range of what you would get if you added, for example, those three, the white, gray, or black. So it has just a ton of information. On the front, it shows you, oh, if I add, by adding this color, by adding red to this color, I can move this all around. It's going to show me what color I'm going to get. So if I add red to this color, now this is a green. So look, it's kind of a subdued, more grayed out orange because it's getting closer to being a opposite on the color wheel. This is the complementary color of green, red. So when you mix red, you're going to get this gray shade. Now, this is a great neutral color you might want to use for the shade on a leaf, for example, because it's not necessarily going to be black. A lot of people want to add black to make the shadows, and you can, but it might look a little bit more natural to have this sort of warm gray that's created by mixing the red and the green. So these are really handy to have. I highly recommend them, and I recommend them every time I talk about color. So all of you who have listened to it over and over again, I still recommend it. Okay. So I'm just going to do some different things with these just to show you what they look like. I'm going to use, I'm just going to use, I don't know if this might be trying to find a number 2, just in case. Okay, this is a number 2 pencil. This is a pencil holder, by the way, if your pencils get short. This was at the Daiso as well for $1.50, but you can put it in this pencil holder and then it makes it longer. And it has this one has an eraser, which is kind of cool. Okay, so this is a number 2 pencil. I'm just going to use that because that might be what you guys have, and it's middle of the road. And I'm just going to show you some different ways that you can embellish these or get different effects based on what you do. Now,
Shauna,
yeah,
I'm sorry, that holder allows you to use pencils that have gotten too short to hold?
yeah, so especially this is good for your colored pencils that are really expensive and you don't want to buy a new one and maybe it's this long, you know, it's
That
turned
is so cool.
a golf pencil or whatever, those little short ones. This one's not real short, but it doesn't have an eraser, so I went ahead and just put it in here.
Cool.
And they have-
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, they're pencil holders, or pencil extenders, I think that might be called. And there's different styles. I think this was another style they had at that store too. So they're handy, especially for your color or your nicer pencils when they get too short. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, as I'm looking at this, I'm thinking a couple different things. First, I'm thinking, where is the light source coming from? So the first one I'm going to do, I'm going to say the light source is coming from straight ahead. So the lightest point is going to be right here. I'm imagining that these leaves are curved. So I'm thinking about the contour or the shape of the item. So I'm imagining that these are curved. The other thing I'm observing is that this leaf or this petal is over the top of these ones, and these two are over the top of these ones. So those are some of the things that I'm taking in as I look at this and as I'm thinking about how I want to approach this. Now, I'm not going to work with color right now because I want you to get an idea of what you would do without color, with just black and white. So the first thing, like I said, is that this is where the most light is going to hit, is right here. And I'm imagining this kind of curved, the petal. So I'm going to get some of those shadows of the contour shadows, the crest shadows along the edge, but not too much. I'm also going to get a little shadow that's behind this petal because it's blocking some light just at the edge of this petal. So I'm going to put I'm just laying down a little bit. Let me get this closer. I'm just laying down a little bit of graphite. I'm going to blend it. So this is not how I'm going to leave it. But I'm just putting a little bit of graphite down. And I don't want to put too much because I can always add it, but I can always remove it too, but I don't want it to be too much at this point. So I'm just lightly putting a little bit of graphite down at those points where I think I want it to be shadowed. Now, I'm going to put a little bit extra down here because I'm imagining the lights coming from the front, but it's maybe it's coming like the sunlight, so it's angled a little top, like from the top coming down. So there might be a little bit of shadow down at the bottom, the base here, but not a lot. So I'm just going to lay a little bit of shadow there. This is my crest shadow. Okay. Now I'm going to take my stump, blending stump, and blend it out. Now I'm going to try not to press too hard because I don't want to smash. This is pretty smooth paper, but I don't want to smash I don't want to smash the tooth down, because once you basically smash that tooth down, it's harder to add more because you lose what the graphite's going to stick to. So I'm just gently blending that out where I laid down that graphite. Now this is a HB, so it's not as soft. So the blendability is not going to be as high as if you were using one of those B leads, but it's not doing too bad. And part of that is because this is such smooth paper, so it's easy to move it around. It's a little slicker than I might have a harder time if I was trying to do this on a rougher paper. And when you're doing this, you're putting a little bit of graphite on to your stub. And so I don't even have to lay any pigment down. In some areas, I could just use what's on the stub. If I don't want too much, if I just want a little bit, I can just use whatever's on there and I can put it down. So this is just a really subtle shading, just implying that there's light coming from, we've got some shadow showing that this petal's in front of these petals and these petals are in front of these petals and that they're curved. So that's the story I'm trying to tell. I'm hoping, let's see, it's pretty subtle. And part of that is because the camera, I think, is having a hard time. Now it looks like it's gone. Trying to get the, here. So can you see that? I'm going to do the same thing, except for this time I'm going to make a lot higher contrast in my color. So I'm going to use the same technique. I'm telling the same story, but now I'm telling that there's harsher lines. Maybe this is just more shadows, more light contrast. And if you're not sure, if you're like, I'm not sure where the shadow, where the contour is, it's okay. Just add it anyway. Just put it somewhere. Just be consistent. If you tend to put it on the, if you're putting shadows at the bottom of the leaves, keep putting them on the bottom of the leaves, or just if you're putting on the left side of something, keep putting it on the left side. Just be consistent. It doesn't matter if it's like exactly realistic. It's just giving it some dimension, regardless of the realism of it. It's giving it some dimension. That's just going to be a little bit more interesting than a solid color. Okay, so you can see that's just a little bit more dimension. It just gives it a little bit more like three-dimensional look to it than the simple flower that's just drawn out. All right, now we can try to do the opposite. See what this looks like. I'm going to try to pretend that this petal maybe has maybe it goes in the middle. So these parts curl out towards you and this part goes in. Now our minds might go, no, that's not right. So it might be harder to buy because our minds want to make it make sense. Maybe in this case, it just kind of looks like it's a variegated leaf. Because part of the challenge here is I have these bold black lines out here. So those, if I had light lines here, I could probably work with that a little bit better, but it's kind of hard to do that. If I didn't have, if I didn't have these bold lines, but that's okay. But still, I can kind of see like here, it's kind of sticking out and up like full, like it's dipped in and it's folding out. That's the effect that I'm trying to go for here. I think it does. I think it has that effect. And all that is from doing is just changing how I shade it. Okay, the next one, I'm going to focus on the negative space. So let's say this is a white flower and it's has a dark background. So I really want to just figure out what are the shapes around it. Now this is a simple version of that. Some of them are a little bit more complex. But you're basically just shadowing the shape around the primary. Okay, so the idea is that now we're really highlighting this subject, and I'm just trying to whip it out real fast. Let's say this is white. We still might have, a little bit of shadow, or we might have some textures in there that show that, oh, okay, that has some, has some texture there, but it is white. And if there's any texture or any contours, those are going to show up as light gray. So then you can highlight those. A little bit of gray. So far, really all of these are white. It's just a difference of having a darker background, but this one I just gave a little bit more center detail just to make it seem like it has some texture to it. All right. The other thing that you can do, instead of doing the blending, you can always do cross hatching. Like I mentioned, I just did a little bit of that there. Let's say I'm only using marker and I'm not using pencil. One way to get some shading with a marker is to do the cross hatching. So maybe I want to and cross hatching is good for, especially if you're trying to make fabrics or like actual texture. Like if I'm trying to make it look like I'm, like burlap or jeans or, some kind of cloth. It's a nice way to give some texture. You'll notice I'm rotating the page because it's just easier for me to do this angle. I like pulling it towards me, as I was talking about before. Just making it a little bit easier based on what's more natural for me to do. So that's a simple way of just giving something a little bit of interest with the marker. And the other thing you can do with a marker is you can embellish it in any way you want. And let's say I want to go back to my mandala roots. And if you're working with a coloring book, you can always embellish your coloring. You can add anything you want. You're not limited to what the artist made. I'll often add more eyelashes or things like that. So I frequently will embellish, or maybe I'll put a little crook in the arm, you know, like just something that'll add a little bit of realism to that particular project. Again, I'm not trying to make it real, but I'm just trying to add an element of realism, just moving in that direction along the spectrum. So you can just have as much fun as you want with the basic shape that you have, and use that in your coloring books. Don't be afraid to embellish with markers, and also with like gel pens. You can have a lot of fun with gel pens. Okay, I want to do one color. We're already at 8:58. Sorry, I'm running long. I do want to get to some show and tell. So I'm just going to do one more thing with color, just so that you guys have an idea of taking it from just the graphite to color. Let's see. I'm going to go with these. So let me just show you how I store my pencils. I have this carrying case, and so I can organize my pencils exactly where I want. And then I create this guide, and this template's in the packet. You just cut these up, but I have a template that fits right behind my pencils, and I have each of them marked the number, and then I have a gradient of each of the colors. So I know exactly where they go, and I have them organized in sets of 3s that I like that work together. So that's how I do mine. There's lots of different ways to do it. You can just throw them on in a, maybe put all your blues in one jar and greens in another jar. A lot of people do that. The thing is I don't want to have to figure out which ones I like to go together. So I just like to do the little extra work ahead of time, and then have less work to do when I'm actually doing my coloring. And I don't want to, and sometimes when you look at the outside of the pencil, it doesn't always match what it looks like on the paper. So I really like to have, you know, take all the time to do all that and figure that out beforehand. Okay, so in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically create, I'm going to do, well, actually, let me do the light source. Let me see, the light source is over here. So it's coming from this side. Make a little sun. Alexa, dismiss. And so I know that I want my lightest colors over here, and then my darkest colors over here. And then I might want a little reflection off the bottom. So right now, I'm just going to start with 3 shades of blue that I like. And you can either do the whole thing in the lightest shade. Now, I should probably sharpen this. I'm trying to work fast. I'm always trying to work fast, but I'll show you how nice this sharpens. So you get a nice sharp, and it doesn't chew up your pencil like a lot of the sharpeners have, like, you know, the wood goes all the way back to here. This doesn't eat up your pencil like that. And that's one of the other reasons I like it. And this is a little bit bigger size. I think this is like a normal pencil size, and then this is bigger still. So it's like small, medium, or wait, no, is this the medium one? Now I'm getting confused.
What kind of sharpener is that?
This is a Faber-Castell.
Okay.
And so you open it this way, it has the two. And then if you open it the other way, let me do that on something. If you open it backwards, it opens up to empty.
Okay. Thank you.
It took me a long time to figure that out. How to open it to empty. So it's a nice travel one. I really like it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and sharpen all of them so you can lay down a whole layer of the lightest color, and gently, again, it's better to layer than to press hard and lose the tooth. You don't want to lose the tooth. So the burnishing part where you press real hard and it gets shiny, kind of get that waxy shine, that should be the last layer that you do. You should start off as gently as you can because you want to keep the tooth intact, because that's where the pigment's going to attach to. But you'll notice, I mean, you're going to see, because there's some tooth, you can see some white behind. I've got a thin layer. I don't have a really heavy layer right now yet. And then I want my middle color. I want that. I can bring that up like 2/3 of the way. That's my next layer. And scumbling, which is kind of like just rotating, is a nice method of laying down your color because it kind of smooths it out a little bit. You don't get lines, like sometimes if you draw straight lines, you see that pattern in there. And now I'm going to take my darkest shade and I'm just going to go up the 1/3, right, darkest. And I'm going to bring that where the shadow is. So in this case, I'm just using the darkest color for my shadow, but you could use an opposing, like a complementary color, or you could use gray, or you could even use black, or maybe like in this case, I would maybe use like an indigo, because that would be, it's in this shade range, but it's darker than these colors. So that one might be like a more contrasting shadow. I think this is a nice way to do it because you get a nice even coating over the whole leaf. Because this lightest color acts as kind of like the primer for your other colors. So as you're laying down these other colors, you're kind of blending that a little bit. Now you can also go in the final layer with the lightest shade and do final blending. So I could go in, I'm going to do that with this first one. I could go in here with this lightest color, and then I can press a little bit harder, not like real hard, but I can just kind of blend out the colors if there's any blending that needed. You can also use, for blending, you could use the white pencil of your set. There's usually a white pencil. So you could use that for blending. It does leave a little bit of a white, whiteness to it. It blends nice, but it does lighten it a bit. So if you really want those vibrant colors, you may want to use the light shade. See how that's a little bit milkier, but it's very nicely smooth. The other thing you can use is actually what's called a blender pencil, and it's no color. It's just basically the binder. But it's basically just like a pencil, but it's clear instead of white. And that's really a nice option too. Now, another way you could do it is you could start with the darkest color and just put it where you want it. And then you can go with the next medium color and then go over the dark color and then continue up from there. Wait, is this, oh, it's not my medium color. And then bring that up to where you want that medium color to go. And then you can take your lightest color and then you go over the top of those and blend that to the top. So that's another way you could do it. And then either blend with the lightest color, especially if it's a real light color, you can blend. If it's not real light, it might make sense to use the white one or the clear blender to blend instead. Now, if I didn't maybe take enough light, maybe I didn't leave it light enough and I want to bring some highlights back. Sometimes if you use the white blender, you can get, you can lighten up a spot with the white blending pen. So I just brought a little bit of white there. You can also try to pick it up with your erasers. So for example, this is the pink eraser, which is kind of abrasive. I'm only going to use it in a small area. So I'm going to go ahead and try that. See if I can pick up. I don't know if that's picking up well. I don't think that's working very well. Try this other side. Maybe the electric eraser will work better. Oh yeah. So that really picked up my colored pencil nicely. And then I can just blend out. I can blend that area so it blends it in a little bit more naturally. Okay. So now I'm going to go, since these are over on the shadow side, I'm going to use more of just my darkest colors. This is my medium color. Now this part right here might have some highlights to it, so I'm going to go real lightly up there. Lay down my darkest color. And then I'm going to blend with my light color. Trying to keep that top part a little bit lighter. Maybe I'll use the white for that very top part. And then this is the darkest petal. It's not anywhere near the light, so I can make this whole petal darker than the other petals. And then as far as shadow goes beneath it, that's when I would probably go with my indigo. Indigo is a nice shadow color. For those of you who follow my other stuff, I use indigo a lot for shadows, for cool shadows. If I'm doing like a cool color scheme, I think it makes a nice shadow. And I'm blending, let's see, I want to blend with, I think I want to blend with this color a little bit. I'm gonna use this, I'm gonna use the stump because it doesn't have any, it has a little bit of graphite on it. That's gonna add some gray, which I'm okay with. Just be careful if you use the stumps for your colored pencils to clean them, or they're, you know, they're gonna have some color left over on them. So just be aware, you know, make sure that you get all the color off before you accidentally put it on something else. I really don't want this shadow over here too much. So I'm just going to clean up that a little bit. There. And then I maybe want this to be darker, so I might add a little bit of, I'll just add some graphite in there. And you can see it's lots of fun, and I could just sit here for hours and play. But all right, so there's a colored version. There's lots of different ways that you can play. Use this as a play sheet. Try different shadows going different ways. Point your light source different directions and see what you get and see how it looks to you. Try different patterns, embellishments. Oh, one more thing, one last thing I really want to show you is you can embellish with gel pens. So you can do highlights. Sometimes on the wax, it can get tricky to lay it down if it's too heavy of a wax buildup. I'm just getting it started on my hand. But you can use it for highlights or just embellishments, some fun little maybe water droplets, or you can just make little jewels or little highlights. So play around with gel pens. Those can be fun too. And just be careful, like I said, if it's a lot of wax, sometimes wax will get on the marker you have to, or the pen, so you have to kind of wipe it off on, I just put it on my hand, and that usually gets the ball going, and literally. So you can have fun with some highlights with gel pens. Okay. Hopefully I've given you guys some fun tricks, tips, and tools to get you started in drawing and coloring. Thank you everybody for joining us for another episode of Healing Art After Hours. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, or share if you find this content helpful. And as always, happy creating. Bye.